And as a result, S&P recommends investors buy Cisco, IBM, and Intel. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Josh Lipton in San Francisco.
From old tech to new, Twitter, which wants to attract more users, didn't. The social media company's average monthly active users stalled in the fourth quarter, disappointing those who were looking for fresh signs of growth. Twitter earned 16 cents a share, and that was better than expected. Revenue just about in line, $710 million, but it was up strongly from a year ago. Now, the stock was volatile after hours, initially falling sharply only to rebound soon after. Julia Borston has more now on Twitter's results.
Twitter's quarterly report disappointing investors and sending the stock plummeting because of one key fact. Its user numbers actually declined from the third to the fourth quarter, which had ended with 305 million monthly active users. The number excludes its SMS fast followers, which use the service on more old-fashioned feature phones. Though the company met revenue expectations and beat earnings projections, it was the fact that it has been unable to grow that Twitter user base that weighed on the stock. And the fact that its Q1 revenue guidance disappointed expectations didn't help any. Twitter saying in its letter to shareholders that user trends are improving so far this year and that marketing efforts are paying off, but that failed to reassure investors. Back over to you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Rather confusing day on Wall Street as investors tried to make sense of testimony from Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen, and we'll have more on what she said a bit later in our program. The Dow Index gained as much as 187 points mid-morning, but then those gains faded. By the close, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 100 points to 15,914. The Nasdaq gained 14. The S&P 500 finished basically flat.
Well, the worst performing stock on the blue chip Dow Index today was Walt Disney Company. It reported record earnings, as we told you last night, but falling profit at its media unit dragged down shares. Separately, Time Warner shares were also lower, much lower, after reporting a bigger than expected drop in quarterly revenue and disappointing results at some of its cable networks. Shares of both closed at multi-year lows.
Tim Nolan joins us now to talk more about the ailing media sector. He is senior media analyst at Macquarie Securities. Tim, welcome. Nice to have you with us this evening.
Thank you.
What about the market's response? Disney's report was pretty good. Is the market overreacting to some of the concerns out there about the media stocks?
I think it's something of an overreaction for some of these names. I think the justification is that the cord-cutting fears are really weighing now. In the quarter just reported, really everything else in both of their reports was fine. Time Warner actually exceeded guidance, and they raised guidance for next year. But it was that one single point, I think, for both of these companies that was the concern. And it's a legitimate concern because this has been the primary profit driver of these companies for a long, long time.
And it's not just, obviously, Time Warner or Disney that was taken out to the woodshed. It was Discovery. It was Viacom, most especially. Talk to me about those two.
Well, interestingly, on Viacom, yesterday when they reported, they actually reduced their guidance for a
of meat and eating the leeks and the garlic. And you know what they were doing? They were serving that to the big people. But when they were out in the wilderness eating manna, they started looking back and thinking, oh man, it was comfortable back there.
As they wrestled with what to put in, what to leave out.
And so we have these knock them down, you know, discussions sometimes around the ping pong table. And we had terrible fights about how to tell stories and how to get to
You know,
where we want
we
to
have
get
two
to.
crazy uncles. I can see that happen.
Fight about how to tell them to tell
Yeah.
stories.
Absolutely.
That's gonna be really difficult because everybody's gonna go with the lesser evil in their view. It's not an intelligent action, it's an emotional one
The exercise that
because everybody's angry.
Even the narrator of the show, Julian Bond, was more than just a voice.
What was great about Julian Bond as the narrator is that he himself had been grounded in the civil rights movement. So it's not like he's a narrator, he's a regular voiceover talent, although he's brilliant at it. It was also that he brings that sensitivity of what that movement meant, and that carries through to all of his narration, I think.
As the film team struggled with painful and emotional stories, Hampton struggled with raising the needed funds. It was a high-wire act all the way through. But in 1988, it paid off, with significant awards and reviews touting the series as prized television. With the success of these 6 films, Blackside moved to produce 8 more. Hampton wanted to zero in on some even tougher stories of America at the racial crossroads, 1965 through 85.
One of the films I produced and directed dealt with sort of the birth of the Prague Party in 1966. Which is also about the black community in policing. And that's how it begins, but it also becomes much, much bigger, you know, in terms of the Panthers' work.
Black Panthers preach every day. Hate. Kill white. Kill the police. Kill the pigs. Hate, hate, hate. That's all you hear from them.
We don't hate nobody because of their color. We hate oppression. We hate murder of black people in our communities.
You never suffer no more. That was my show. Cassius Clay is the name no more. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It's Muhammad Ali.
And that was going to be about Muhammad Ali who refused to go to Vietnam.
The real enemies of black people are right here, not in Vietnam.
It was the times, the 60s, you know, it was, you know, the notion of the black power struggle. The black power was full throttle.
We look at this world, we see white. We look at this universe, we see white. Even Taj from the king of the jungle in Black Africa.
And I knew that history, you know, I really knew that history well. And for me to work on eyes, it's like, wow, this is like a religious experience. That's seriously how I took it.
Together, the images in these 14 films, the images of protest, passion, and people moving forward,
I hereby declare my candidacy.
had an important impact on viewers and on the nation.
I was 14 years old when I first saw Eyes on the Prize. And my mom had been active with SNCC, my father had been active with CORE. My grandparents were active in the NAACP, and my mom also was when she was young. And so it added images, it added context, it affirmed that their stories were important.
The stories in Eyes on the Prize are the roots, the basis of today's questions around race and American society. And that was true when we were making the films, and it's true today.
One thing that Eyes did, both of you, part 1 and part 2, was just put people's feet to the fire and say, look at these stories. And the stories that are still here today, that resonate from back in Reconstruction, post-Reconstruction, the segregation in the 30s, civil rights struggles in the 50s and 60s, they resonate today. In some ways, that's tragic, but that's the reality of America.
I'm raising really young children, and the role they've inherited is not the one that I wanted them to inherit. Voting rights are under attack. Police brutality is a real problem, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
I never to believe in the American system. Never. Never did.
You still have segregation across this country. You see communities where people are just isolated. You know, I live in Brooklyn, New York, which is one of the most diverse communities in America. Over 100 different ethnic groups, 70 different neighborhoods. But I can take you to places where people have never left their neighborhoods and they just are there and they're isolated and You know, it's almost as if it was 1955 all over again.
In many ways, we've gone backwards. In certain things like housing, we've never really made that much progress in the first place.
Every time Negroes went in, the real estate agent said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have anything listed." Now you can find something somewhere else, and it was always back in the ghetto, but they didn't have anything. And then soon after that, we sent some of our fine white staff members into those same real estate offices, and the minute the white person got in, they opened the book. "Oh yes, well we have several things. Now what exactly do you want?"
Housing and civil rights need personal. If you look at schools are tied to housing, the types of jobs that are
Redistribution of economic power. Yeah.
and he says that in Eyes on the Prize. So the point is, you see all of the issues that we're dealing with today.
While the U.S. economy is on somewhat of a recovery, in Black America, the economic recovery has yet to take hold.
And so when we talk about wealth gaps, it disproportionately impacts a certain group of people. Black and brown, Hispanic and African American. It disproportionately impacts women. When you talk about a wealth gap, it disproportionately impacts people who live in either extraordinarily urban centers or extraordinarily rural centers.
What gives me hope in this moment, when it comes to a tough issue like police violence on young men getting killed, is that the young activists have really struck something. The Black Lives Matter movement really struck something, which I have found the strategy that will ultimately end police brutality. The battle to end police brutality will succeed very much the way that the anti-lynching movement succeeded, which is through shaming the country, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, out of process.
There are some who are outside of our community who try to create this narrative that the civil rights struggle is over.